Ladies and gentlemen, it is game day eve. We are 24 hours away from taking on the Wake Forest Demon Deacons, so you know what that means. That's right. We have another Know Your Foe, and we have Cam Lemons Debro, the Wake Forest genius, and also the head of tailgates of Wake Forest. But I'll tell you about that and more on this edition of Locked On Seminoles. Let's ride.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome back to another edition of Locked On Seminoles. What's up, everybody? It's your boy Drake here, and today we have another Know Your Foe. We have the one and only Mr. Cam Lemons Debro, a.k.a. the head of tailgating at Wake Forest, of bloggers So Dear at SB Nation, and also Demon Deacon Digest at 247 Sports. Cam, what's going on, my guys? Your third time on the show.
Hey, man, third time, best time. Thanks for having me back. This is what I said earlier to somebody. I love talking to the FSU guys. I think you guys are some of the best media people around. I always had a lot of fun talking to you guys.
I mean, dude, it's a great time to have you on here. Like folks, for those of you who don't know, Cam, he was one of the first guests we actually ever had on Noles Anonymous back in our smaller days, but now we have a StreamYard, we got a banner, we got a ticker down below, so to make sure to follow Cameron where all his content is. But we're gonna talk about that. Cam, we're talking about the game this weekend, game tomorrow. The Wake Forest Demon Deacons come down to Tallahassee. Before we start with everything, I do want you to address the comments made by one Mr. Dave Clawson, apparently comparing us to one Vanderbilt, and also basically, you know what? I'm not gonna put words in your mouth. Should we actually make of those comments, or what do you make of those comments?
I was watching the press conference, so I wasn't actually in town for today's press conference, but I saw him streamed and everything. And I mean, as a whole, my first instinct was, I don't think he's checked the actual forecast since the day before. Because honestly, I think if you checked Sunday or Monday morning, you would have been like, oh, hey, is this game getting played? Because that was my first thing. I didn't know this game was getting played. And so that's why I was like, you know what? I think he might have just checked it then. And then when, talked to our AD, John Curry, when you guys handle this, I'm going to go focus on the game. And I know there have been parents on the Wake Forest, Wake Forest roster that were worried Tuesday, Wednesday, and even today they reached out and were like, is this playing? Yes, no. So I don't think he necessarily brought that up on his own. I think there were legitimately parents concerned about it.
And there definitely were concerned, so not 100%.
Yeah, and it's their kids. We would all be concerned about our kids. And also a lot of us aren't from Florida. We have no idea. Like some of my Florida friends are like, oh, cool, I'll just get upstairs with my lawn chair, a beer, be fine. I'm like, I don't know, man. But I mean, so that part I just kind of moved on with. And the whole thing about the Vanderbilt thing, I get, that little clip of it, it might be like the Vanderbilt game. If you told me on Tuesday that a team, and correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like Tallahassee isn't necessarily this huge, it's not Atlanta. It's not like Knoxville. There aren't 50, 60K people there that can fill up the stands by that. I feel like a lot of the FSU fans will drive from 3, 4, 5, 6 hours away. And it's if you're in that sort of zone of I'm 3 to 7 hours away. I just got told because I think what was 2 or 3 hours before was when we heard all of the students, the classes got canceled for the entire week. It's okay, cool. What environment am I going to expect by just that little bit of information? And I thought that made sense. Would I have put it that way? No, it made sense. But all in all, it's just I don't care. I've been.
You just want Saturday to be here. You just want some football to be played.
I just want to talk about cover 2, cover 4. What's going on with what Jordan. Talk about Jordan Travis being really good. And I think Dave's really complimentary about Jordan Travis, and he was actually really complimentary about Mike Norvell. And being hey, Mike's been really good at blending what he had coming in from the last regime and the transfer portal. I was I would love to talk about that, not just looking for shots to take at these things. So I'm just whatever, man. I just want to play football.
I mean, basically, just F it, we ball. Let's just get go on the gridiron real quick and play it up. So
right.
We'll go past that, but I think Dave Clawson's going to understand that actually because I think we're a sold out crowd now. I think all student tickets are given out, which is, listen, you want a packed oak? I mean, you want the experience? We'll give you the experience because that's something that we need, especially now with an FSU team that is undefeated and is 4-0 with their first real big test against a Wake Forest team that is really, really damn good, Cam. And I kind of wanted to ask, what was your expectations heading into the year? And also, we did hear that what happened with Sam Hartman heading into, I guess, week 1, but came back week 2. So how basically have been the emotions at Wake Forest overall over the past month?
I think it's been a fun little roller coaster. So I mean, going into the season before the blood clot really happened with Sam, I mean, it was, you're competing for an ACC title. You're trying to your only hump that you haven't beaten this year is Clemson, but outside of that, every game on your schedule is winnable. There's some patches that are kind of rough, and then Sam gets out. I remember being on vacation and getting a text being like, "Wake up! Like you gotta be around for this." And I was like, "Oh God, this sounds terrible." We learned Sam was out, and it was an unspecified amount of time, and and it was like you hear that some of those things you got to get worried, and it's like does that mean is it in 2 weeks? Is it November? None of us knew. Like absolutely none of us knew. And then you kind of have the murmurs coming back around. It was after week 1 where I know it was VMI, and that's the stamp of it is VMI. Mitch Griffiths looked really, really good.
Actually did.
He looked great. And so everyone was like, you know what? I think we can win 8-9 games with this. Also, I thought the line when Sam was out of 6.5 was just the dumbest thing ever. Like the win total. Like you went from a 9.5 to a juiced 6.5. Come on now. But I thought it was really everyone was in kind of a weird place. And then we heard Sam was coming back for Vanderbilt, and everything was really like, okay, cool. We can compete for an ACC title, but the one big thing is Clemson and competing in those big games. And I thought that's something that Wake has not necessarily done the best of in the last few years. And I mean, especially Sam Hartman in the last few years. And then you have last week, and I was in the stands last week, and it hurt. I'm not going to lie. That one hurt.
I was say, is this considered live tweeting? Because I remember you live tweeted against Liberty, and that game was like a roller coaster following you on there. And then again, Clemson, I'm like, oh, I feel bad for Cam because you were this close. Close.
You were so close. And I know Clawson and all the players told us this week, there's no such thing as moral victories. However, I do think there is some things you can take away from it. And one thing is, I think Sam got the monkey off his back of playing in big games. He didn't throw a single interceptable pass. Besides the last one, besides the literally last pass of the game, he was electric all game, and that was the offensive line held up all game, and it was just something. It was like it felt like for the first time since I've been around, and really since I guess 2006, that Wake belonged. Win or lose, it felt like Wake actually belonged.
No, and I mean that's something that we've seen over since Dave Clawson actually has probably taken over. That we had a show, a few months ago. This is back when basically all of us were not against Norvell, but we were still kind of wondering if he's the guy, whether or not. Right. And we looked over all the head coaches in the entire conference. And from when Max and Dave were with me, it was resounding that, yes, of Dave Clawson, like I would take him in a heartbeat because of what he's actually built and cultivated over at Wake Forest. And also because like you sneakily also are becoming not wide receiver but you've produced productive wide receivers at the college level for so much with Ja'Cory Roberson last year, and then Sage Surratt the year before, and then now you have A.T. Perry, and then you still have other weapons on the outsides too as well. So right now, this Wake Forest offense is probably one of the more dynamics in football. So that kind of brings me to what's the bread and butter of your offense, and that is the mythical, much talked about all week, the long mesh, right? So I wanted to ask you if you could explain what this long mesh is basically to our audience. How is it different? How is Sam Hartman and Dave Clawson so effective with? Like, what is it? What do they do to make it so effective? And what do defenses need to do to kind of like stifle it if they can? Yeah,
it starts up front with the offensive line. It's really weird because the offensive line is a bunch of undersized kind of guys, and I think there's one offensive lineman on Wake's roster that's over 305 pounds, which is kind of weird when you think about.
That's strange, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, like you think, we need a bunch of 330-pound behemoths. Like, no, with the speed that they're going, it's like you can't have those 330-pound guys. But it starts up there. The guys really are good about just making sure they're not getting beat off the block. But when they get the ball to Sam, when they snap to Sam, it looks like a regular RPO. It's really just Sam's reading. Sam's just going to kind of read the defense, see what he gets him. A lot of times people think he's reading the linebackers. He's not reading the linebacker. He's actually reading the safeties. So when he gets the ball, he's reading to see whether you're playing single high, two high. He's seeing are one or both of the safeties coming down into the box. If that answer is yes, then that ball is going over the top. And we saw exactly what happened against Clemson last week, which was just you're not going to be able to stop it because I don't think there are many corners in the ACC that are just good enough to handle these receivers. If the safeties are just staying up, okay, that's where the second part of this kind of goes is, all right, what are the linebackers doing? Are the linebackers coming in to try to fill a gap? If they're coming in and trying to fill a gap, cool. There's a tight end. There's a slot receiver that's probably coming around the slot over the middle. There's probably someone going on an out route. Get the ball out. You're fine. Cool. if the linebackers are kind of staying back in the zone, hand the ball off, take your 4-yard run, go from there.
Okay, I mean that's great to hear with that. And I mean we do, Jamie Robinson was all ACC, I think, defensive nominee for this past season heading into the year, and also Akeem Dent you've seen kind of take the next step forward actually, being that 5-star blue chip prospect and also is playing himself into NFL draft consideration. So let's move forward to basically both sides of the ball. But first, Cam, do you do any fantasy?
I do a fair amount of fantasy actually.
You ever heard of Underdog Fantasy?
I have. I haven't dabbled in it. I've been meaning to. I don't know if it's legal in DC, but if it is, I need to try it out.
Well, if it's legal in your area, this episode today, folks, is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy, the easiest place to spice up all your college football season, whether it's taking over Sam Hartman's completions over, Jordan Travis' completions over, because there will be a lot of passing, as we discussed defense later on the show. And then also, in my personal opinion, look towards also Trayshawn Ward and Trey Benson over rushing yards as well. But head over to Underdog Fantasy today, sign with the promo code Locked On. That's one word, LOCKEDON, and Underdog will double. That's right, double your first deposit up to $100. Math is 2 times 100. That's 200. So deposit 100, get 100 for free. So go to UnderdogFantasy.com today or find the Underdog Fantasy app in the App Store or Google Play Store. Underdog Fantasy, LOCKEDON. Get in on the college football pick'em action today. Now, Cam, when we first met you, you were the big Jamie Newman stan.
I love that guy.
And but slowly I've seen you kind of not embrace, but love to see kind of what Sam Hartman has been to this team for the past few seasons. So I do wanted to ask, how have you seen Sam Hartman, I guess, evolve as a quarterback since basically his first, true starting season 2 years ago up until this point now?
I mean, besides him putting on 30 pounds of muscle, because it kind of dates me. His freshman year when he came in early enrolled was my senior spring of college. One of my friends was a senior advisor, and I was just like, wow, that was 4 years ago. At this point, almost 5. And it's really weird because when I saw him, I came in, I was like, okay, this is this really kind of scrawny kid. And then when I remember being out of college and everything, and going, well, he's getting the starting role against Tulane in 2018. And that first kind of year, it was just caution to the wind. It was, he thinks he can make every throw, and he's gonna take every throw. And sometimes it's great, and sometimes it's not great. And I remember kind of touched on it back then of against teams that they were just better than, he did very well against, and then teams that had equal or better talent than, he didn't do that well against. And you've kind of seen this slow progression even after the 2019 season where James took over, but in 2020, 2021, and then this year started being, I guess, more careful with the ball. He still thinks he can make every throw, and you want that out of your quarterback, but he has started being more hesitant and being like, okay, I shouldn't take this throw. And then I think in 2020 they didn't really want him running that much because they weren't sure about what was behind him. But last year and even this year, you started seeing him take off more and more of his legs, and it's been that's that extra added thing that I think the offense needed, and it's been great. And then we saw it last week where, the last week and 2 weeks before that, where he just didn't want to throw interceptions and didn't throw interceptions. And it's that's the next step, is just taking care of the football. And it's been a really nice thing to see.
And this is something else, because you basically, I remember you had a tweet earlier on in the year where I think I forgot who ranked the quarterbacks in the entire conference overall, and you saw several names ahead of him. And I know your opinions on Phil Dracovic and Tyler Van Dyke and even Brandon Armstrong too, but there was something disrespectful about Sam Hartman kind of being outside that top 5.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I understand if there is a thing of him not performing well in big games. However, you can't sit here and say he did something last year that the only people that have done that were Lamar Jackson and Deshaun Watson, and be like, he's not a top 5 quarterback in the league. Because it's it doesn't make sense. I love Malik Cunningham. I think he's a very electric guy. I mean, Devin Leary has one of the biggest arms I think we've seen. And Yerk and TVD and Brandon Armstrong, there's these guys that had really good seasons last year, but then it's what did the guy who did something that was matched by 2 Heisman winners, what did he do to fall? And that's where I thought that logic just didn't make sense to me.
No, I completely understand that. And also, it helps that Sam Hartman has these weapons around him. And then what's funny, we kind of didn't know much about A.T. Perry until last season. Right. And then I think all of FSU fans realized that after A.T. Perry, I think had 10 catches for 155 yards. And even Ja'Cory Roberson was the big name heading into the game last year. He only had 4 catches for, I think, around 21 yards. And then, but even this year, it's not the A.T. Perry show. Your highest rated wide receivers right now per PFF are Jamal Banks, Donovan Green, and Keyshawn Williams, all graded above a 75. Could you tell us more about those three weapons? Because those are kids that we might hear their name a lot on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, so when we went in the fall camp, and even after fall camp, Dave Clawson was very much, we have three starting guys on the outside. We have A.T. Perry, we have Donovan Green, who missed last season, and then we have Jamal Banks, who's in his third year. Donovan is honestly the guy that they thought would have the A.T. Perry season last year. He tore his ACL. I remember Dave Clawson is literally about to go up to the podium on AC kickoff day, and Clawson's like, check your phone in about 5 minutes, and it was Donovan had tore his ACL. He was a 4-star kid. I think a top 247 prospect coming out of school in 2019. I mean, he's someone that just has super muscular build. I think runs in the high 4.4s. I think he's arguably the best athlete on the team. And we kind of didn't have that. We kind of didn't have that factor last year, and then he comes back this year, and I think he had a quiet game last week, and it was like 2 catches for 52 yards and 2 touchdowns. And it's like, I'm glad that's a quiet game. Good job. Jamal Banks was a guy that I really, his first year, his whole camp story is we were doing one-on-ones, and he made this insane catch and then just like kind of celebrated about it. And they were like, okay, that's really good, but we don't do that here. And they gave him an offer, and he committed. And the last 2 years, you've seen him kind of flash during camp. There would always be times that he would just be like, he makes this absurd catch that he has no business making, but it only would go for like 10, 15 yards. And then this year during camp, it'd be something that he'd make that absurd catch, and then it'd go for 50, go for 60 yards. And it's like, that's the progression we needed to see out of him. And that's what we saw there. So, I definitely, when Clawson told us we had 3 guys outside, we were a little hesitant, but I mean, we saw it last week. I mean, in the slot, there's Keyshawn Williams and also Taylor Morin as well. I mean, Taylor.
Oh, trust me, I know all about Taylor Morin.
Yeah, Taylor Morin's the guy that makes kind of the tough catches, but Keyshawn's probably the game breaker. I mean, there was a play against Clemson last week where, if it doesn't, there's a blindside block, but also Sam's helmet gets ripped off and should have been face mask. But there's a play where Keyshawn kind of catches a little out route on the field side, and then works it back all the way across the field, brings it back up for like a 15-yard catch, and it's just like, there hasn't been guys like that on Wake's team since Greg Dortch. And I remember after Keyshawn Williams' freshman year, after that spring camp, I had people telling me he's better than Greg Dortch. And I was like, that is the highest amount of praise you could have ever given him. So let's see it. And then now we're starting to see how electric he is, how like they're against Liberty. They probably don't win against Liberty if he doesn't go up and at being 5'9" and go up and just make a catch in between 2 defenders. There's just a stable of these guys, and it's credit to Kevin Higgins, who has just been one of the better wide receiver coaches in the nation, but he just keeps kind of churning these guys out.
I mean, it's crazy the thing that like Wake Forest is like developing and finding these diamond in the rough wide receivers. And I remember last time we had you on here, we weren't able to host the episode due to quality issues, but you did discuss with us basically the commitment of Micah Mays, who was a West Palm Beach product down here wide receiver. He actually was slated to attend the game this weekend, but however, due to Hurricane Ian, chosen to stay down south. But let's go over to the offensive line real quick, because one of my favorite players in the NFL draft was Zach Tom. Right. And now Zach Tom, I believe actually is now with the Green Bay Packers. So how has the offensive line, I guess, fared, because to me, he was the most underrated lineman in the ACC, was Zach Tom. So I want to know, how has the offensive line kind of, what's the word I'm looking for, withstood like his absence, or was taking a step forward, or have they taken a step back overall? Yeah, I mean,
I think it's been fine. It was really interesting because also when Donovan Green went down last year, we also learned Javionte Nash went down last year with a torn pec. And it was something that, it threw Devontae Gordon, who's in his third year, kind of into the starting lineup as a right tackle. So how Clawson's kind of worded this to us this year has been, they really have 5 starters coming back, because Javionte Nash was supposed to be a starter last year. And Devontae Gordon started last year. It's been fine. First game of the year against VMI, I thought they just didn't block as well as they could. I thought they blocked fine. I think they could have blocked a little better. It's been a little bit of cohesion thing, but also a guy like Michael Juergens missed the first 3 weeks of fall camp. So they were really just trying to ease him back in. Second week, I thought against Vanderbilt, I thought they were a lot better. And then the week before against Liberty, up and down, thought the running backs didn't help them out a bit, and fine. I thought they had their best game ever against Clemson last week. I don't know if PFF would agree with that, and it's kind of is what it is, but I don't think you can sit there and compare. you can't sit there and see what they did this year to what they've done every single year against Clemson in terms of giving Sam time and to throw the ball and say they were just awful. I think they did a fantastic job of holding up those aliens on the.
They're the monsters, dude. Like that defensive line's ridiculous.
They didn't even have Xavier Thomas, and it was like, oh, cool, you only have 3 first-round draft picks on this line. Cool, good job. And I think that's if you're trying to get to like trying to beat the mesh, that's where you're gonna have to win with. I mean, the big thing about the mesh is it challenges you. If you ever start bringing blitz, and that's what Clemson did. If you start bringing blitzes, you better pray you get home, because if you don't get home, that ball is going for 20 yards. But what people have had success with in the last, whether it's Clemson, Pitt in the second half of the AC Championship game, Clemson every other year, what they had success with is winning with 4. If you can win up front with 4 guys and keep your linebackers kind of like on their assignments, stay in like a cover 2 or cover 4, you'll have success because you're basically limiting all the options Wake can do. If you can't win with 4, it gets real hard.
Okay. I mean, that kind of makes sense for us. And that basically, I mean, we're hoping to get Fabian Lovett back this week. I personally don't think he'll be back till the Clemson game. Jared Verse, the same thing as well. And also, we saw that Derek McClendon, I think he was wearing a green jersey in practice this week. So we'll see who we have coming in the defensive line. But that's something that's been a strength for FSU. Now the depth is being tested really quickly. But also quickly before we head on the defense side of the ball, you did lose Christian Beal-Smith to the transfer portal. I believe now he's with South Carolina.
Yes.
So, and I know Christian Turner was, I think, the backup from last season, correct? Like,
right,
backed him up?
Yeah.
So, really quickly, how is Chris as the running game? I haven't seen or heard much from the running game of Wake Forest, obviously, because Sam Hartman, your wide receivers, why would you? Are they actually any part, basically, of the offense? Are they more of a supplement or just something that basically you rely on when you need to?
I mean, it's kind of you take it as you go. I mean, if the offense can give you a run play, defense can give you a run play, you run the ball. I mean, the one thing they've got to learn to be a better job at is just taking the holes when they can get there. With Wake's offense, a 2-3 yard run is good. They weren't doing that against Liberty. They were sitting there trying to break off big runs, and that is why they rushed for like 10 yards or something against Liberty, which was really tough. But last week against Clemson in the first half, Clemson essentially said, "We're going to take the run away from you and hope Sam Hartman can't beat us." Bad mistake. But in the second half, when Clemson went to more of a cover 2, we started seeing the running backs actually start breaking off runs. Justice Ellison has really been the guy that's taken over that 1A spot. Christian Turner is kind of 1B, but if they're trusting their holes, they'll get 3-4 yards a clip. It's just they need to start trusting their holes more. And they didn't against VMI, they didn't against Liberty, but we saw against Vandy and we saw against the second half of Clemson. Like when they did that, it was actually effective. Can you do that consistently?
Well, folks, ladies and gentlemen, listen to Cam. You must always trust your holes. And now let's go over to the defensive side of the ball. All right, Cam. Defense last year for Wake Forest. To take a word from Candace Cooper from Locked On ACC, the bar was in hell. It was not a very good defense. It was very porous. And right now, I'm looking over your scores from the last few weeks. BMI win 44-10. Vanderbilt, improved Vanderbilt team, I'll give you that, 45-25. Liberty, that's the game that I'm pretty sure I thought you were going to have a sort of an episode on Twitter, 37-36. And then last week, Clemson, a newly reformed DJU, a 45-51 loss. So for those first 3 games, is the defense improved? Because even though I will say that Miami might lose all 3 of those games, so congratulations on winning those. What do we take from this Wake Forest defense? Are they actually improved? Because for PFF, they are. Or simply is it just is it an improvement of what was a bad defensive unit last year?
Right. I don't think there's a question it's been improved. I don't want to be the guy that stats are always lying, but I mean you can look at it just for the microcosm of Clemson, for example. The Wake was terrible at defending the run last year, and if you just looked at Shipley's rushing yards last week, I think he had 20 carries for 149 yards, something like that. He had a 59-yard run on the first play of the game. Every other if you take that one run out, he ran for 2.5 yards to carry the rest of the game. And I was like, okay, cool. You showed against a bunch of aliens that you can stop the run. And I think a lot of the times last year where things went wrong was A, injuries, but B, it was just they missed so many tackles here and there. There would just be coverage bust here and there. It was just things that you just couldn't have happen. And this year, whenever they've kind of given up a lot of these points, especially against DJ, DJ was just throwing good balls, man. He was just throwing good passes. There was a few throws that I always went, you just gotta take your cap out. Like there was a run at the end. I think it was the last touchdown they scored in regulation, where they have Will Shipley just wrapped up with 3 guys, and on Shipley's 4th effort, he just Supermans into it. I'm like, there's nothing you can do about that. And so I think it's been improved. There's certain things they want to clean up. Like I think against Liberty, they missed a bunch of tackles on that game, and that was like okay, you can't go back to that sort of defense. But as a whole, I mean, they've stayed relatively healthy. I think they've, losing Kobe Davis for the year sucked against Vanderbilt. I mean, that score on that also kind of lied too, because it was supposed to be like kind of a 45 to 17 game, and then AJ Swan drives down on the bunch of walk-ons. So whatever, I'll take that.
That kid's good though. I'll give AJ Swan some
AJ Swan's good, and I'll take that. But it's like it hurts when it's like, oh cool, we could have been a sub 20 game, and then the walk-ons give on a touchdown. But yeah, so I mean, it's been improved. I've really enjoyed how they've started to really tee up on the defensive line. I've really enjoyed Kobe Turner. I think he's the number 1 overall defensive player on PFF right now. A transfer from Richmond, Malik Mustafa, body-wise, has been great in safety. One of the things I think they needed last year was they just needed more talent. There was just kind of like a mishmash of like their safeties that shouldn't have been playing safety, corners that shouldn't have been playing corner. And I think this year they're just more depth, especially if they can get a guy like Kalen Carson back of like, there are pieces at every level that you're like, okay, cool. You're not just an ACC level player, you're a high level ACC level player.
And one of the things I do remember last year that you were discussing, that it was last year, the year before, that your secondary was just decimated by injury. I'm pretty sure you actually had walk-ons actually playing the quarterback spot. I remember that was one thing that you highlighted. What was it, Nasir? Was it Nasir Taylor?
Nasir Greer. Yeah, I mean, that was probably last year where after the UNC game, they were down to about to play a walk-on at corner. Nick Anderson was a walk-on at safety, but it was bad. Like it was really bad.
I mean, listen, you're in a lot better spot this year, and like it starts up with the big boys up front. Then you've already highlighted Kobe Turner, one of the players that I'm kind of keeping an eye on. That's probably my X factor that our offensive line needs to stop is Rondell Bothroyd. And I kind of wanted you to discuss basically those big men up front, because that defensive line sneakily could make some noise, especially because of potential injuries along the FSU offensive line.
Yeah, I mean, they're a team that loves to stunt. They love throwing some little bit of confusion out there. They know they want to win with 4 up front. They'll occasionally bring a 5th, but they really are challenging guys like Rondell Bothroyd, like Jasheen Davis, like Kobe Turner and Deion Burgon to win up front, and they've done a really good job of that so far. I think last year a lot of times I think Luigi Villain was a great guy, and I know he's on the Vikings right now, and I think he was 2nd in the AC in sacks. But a couple times at the run game, he'd like him, Rondell, they would get too far upfield, and that hasn't been much of a problem this year. We haven't had a problem with people getting too far upfield. And I think it's like with the new addition of defensive coordinator Brad Lambert from Purdue, I think it was a good thing for them to. One thing he's really been emphasizing, I know it's always coach speak of, we want guys to be more aggressive. But one thing they've told us is they just have to think less now. Like last year with Lyle's a good guy, and I know he's at Duke now, but it felt like some things were just being made too complicated for the defensive linemen, because they were like either having to cover for injuries in the backfield, or instead of just kind of taking on and just saying win your guy, they're like, well, I need to fill a block here and there. And it's like, no, they're being asked to win this year, and they're winning.
Okay, and then the last thing about personnel, and then we'll get into like the more, I guess, bigger picture stuff of what FSU needs to do to kind of beat up or kind of how to win the game. I know you talked about one player in particular actually being one of your star players or your captain of your defense. And I don't think the folks actually at home know who this player is. Could you tell me more about Malik Mustafa and actually the importance he has for this defense?
Yeah, I mean, another Richmond transfer. I'm sure Richmond's tired of us using their team as a farm team. I remember when they offered him in the summer, last summer, and I was like, this kid. I turned on the Richmond film and I was like, this kid just flies everywhere. He's a local kid from Charlotte. He tore his ACL actually in the Gator Bowl. So on December 31st, he tore his ACL roughly 6 months ago. And then we kind of heard, oh yeah, he'll be back for fall camp starting in August. And we were like, he tore his ACL like 6 months ago. What are we doing here? And they're like, no, he'll be back. And then we saw him, like, he had a couple days of non-contact, and then he came through like a week later, like full contact. And we're like, how? And it feels like he's bulked up. He's bought into new safeties coach, James Adams, also from Purdue, and really just started being like, I think my favorite quote from it is, I just like hitting people. and that's just been his big thing. I think he's leading the team in forced fumbles and in sacks. I think which is impressive for a guy that's 5'11", 190 on a good day. He's just been, for a guy that's in his third year of college, he plays like he's in his sixth year. And I think he's someone that even former safeties for Wake that are in the pros, they're like, yeah, no, he's an NFL level safety.
He also leads y'all's team in sacks. Did you know that?
Yeah, which is weird. I don't know if you want your safety leading the team in sacks, but
I mean, I did see the Clemson game. I remember specifically that name. I'm like, who the hell is that guy? Because you're right. He's really quick to the ball carrier. And just like, he also, the way he hits is like, it's Cam Chancellor-esque. It's really damn violent, but it's like controlled violence. Is like, I think the best way to put it.
Yeah.
So then
I'm excited to have him back. I know he separated his shoulder, which sounds really painful last week. But I mean, he was on the depth chart this week, and I think he'll play. But yeah, it's fun to have him around.
That separated shoulder, you would not hear from me for about a month. I wouldn't be nowhere near that field. But Cam, let's do big picture now. Since you are the preeminent voice and mind for Wake Forest football, and you've watched enough tape on Jordan Travis, you've seen he's a much more improved passer, especially from the past few seasons. What are the keys for Jordan Travis and his FSU offense to somewhat exploit this Wake Forest defense? And also on the other side, what does Adam Fuller need to do to not stop Wake Forest? Because I don't think, and if Clemson was able to do that, they would have done it last week. How are they able to, I guess, minimize the damage against Wake Forest defense? I
mean, FSU on offense, first, it's just mentally exhausting Wake Forest. The question is, how much does Wake have left in the tank from last week? I think that's a very fair question to ask. I think they have enough. I think they have a lot of tank left, but I think it's if Wake gets down 14-0, 17-3, do they have enough in the tank to kind of come back there? If you start fast and you kind of mentally exhaust them, I think you can do that. And honestly, I think the best way for FSU to do that this week, and I think what Wake's going to try to, I think Wake's going to try to take away the run game. I don't know how much they'll take away from Benson and Ward and LT. I think those guys are really, really good. But if Wake does take away the run game, Jordan Travis has got to continue to make the throws. We've seen him to make the throws. He's got to make those throws. I think you'll want to test the Wake Forest corners as much as you possibly can. If you're hitting them, cool. If you're not, then you'll got to figure something out there. But I think you've got to start fast, and I think you've got to see what big shots you can take there. Defensively, I mean, you just got to win up front. I think the reason Wake lost last week is because there were like 3 or 4 reps towards the end of the game that Brian Brissy, Tyler Davis, and Miles Murphy just flat out won. It's just those guys just on separate plays just won a rep, and that was it. If you can't do that against this team, they're gonna eat you alive. There's only so many throws. Sam Hartman isn't gonna have a bad game throwing out routes every single time. At a certain point, especially if you're playing a lot of cover 2, cover 4, which is what I think FSU is gonna do. If you're gonna let him get into nothing but rhythm throws, at a certain point, those rhythm throws become deep shots. And if you're not getting home and you're not really rattling Sam Hartman at all, there's not much you can do there. But if you can get there with 4 and even 5, you can say if you can get there with 5, then you'll stand a better chance of keeping yourself in and seeing can I bait Wake into throwing some turnover worthy throws? Can I bait Wake into running when they really shouldn't be running?
See, Cam, this is why I love having you on here, mainly because I was going to ask you specifically about the Clemson game. I love how you jumped right into that, because that was an emotionally taxing game. And having an overtime game that you're that close to winning and you lose that game, that's definitely going to be weighing on the minds for them, especially doing a travel week. But now, prediction time. One, you've never, ever, ever picked FSU to win this game. And I know you're not going to do that today either. So I want you to give me really quickly one player in offense, one player on defense, not named Sam Hartman or not named one of the names that we listed, that FSU fans should watch out for, and then give me not only your prediction, but also where's your money going from our friends on Rebel Line.
On offense, I'll probably go Justice Ellison at running back. I think it's an easy answer to go a wide receiver, but I think, like I said, I think FSU is going to go to a soft cover 2 man, cover 4, and just say, let's get you can get your yard to the ground, and we'll go from there. If Ellison can pop a couple runs and make them have to start respecting the pass, I think it'll go a long way, and I'm really interested to see that. Defensively, I think it's got to be who's going to cover Johnny Wilson. That dude's 6'7", 230
That
pounds.
dude is Johnny Quest. That man is on a quest to just ruin defensive back careers. The way he just treated Jarvis Brownlee like his son in Louisville, it was just that was just not okay.
That was great. Also, yeah, you guys are very happy Jarvis Brownlee isn't here because I'm pretty sure AT just destroyed Brownlee last year.
I like Brownlee actually a lot, but I was like, he got cooked. He got cooked.
I'd probably go Jalen Garnes. I know he's a bigger safety. He's one of my favorite players on the team. I think that Tula probably have kind of over the top on Johnny Wilson a bit. They'll play him in the box a little bit too. He's kind of all over the place. He's essentially just a linebacker that is just a little bit too light, and so he doesn't have necessarily the whole bunch of speed, but he hits pretty well. So I think I'm interested to see where they use him on Wilson. I'm interested to see where they use him on the run game. Prediction: I've kind of sat here around and I've kicked around 41-31 Wake. The over I've taken Wake.
I've done that. That was the first thing I took.
I was so worried about it being wet and windy, and now it's like a perfect day. So I was just like, this is fine. I'll probably have Wake first half team total 13.5. I thought that was a steal. But I think the biggest reason why I'll pick Wake is I think I know what Wake is. I think the first four or so weeks of the season, you're not trying to find out who's elite. You're not trying to find out You're not trying to find out who's elite. You're trying to find out who's bad, who's terrible, and who's above average. And I think these are two good to above average teams. Like I think they're two like upper teams right now. But my question right now for I know what Wake is right now because I think they'll get back some people this week. They're trending healthy, and I know they've played a really good team in Clemson. I don't know that about FSU right now. I think FSU has shown a lot of really good things. I think they've shown they've shown a couple bad things, but the really good things have come against arguably the worst team in the ACC in Boston College against Duquesne. I mean, LSU, I have no idea what to think about LSU. I know LSU record-wise looks really good. LSU has played Southern, a not great Mississippi State team, and then I don't remember who their third win was against, but
New Mexico. I think it was New Mexico or New Mexico State, and they play Auburn this week.
Yeah, so they've played really three, like they played two terrible teams and one fine team, and so I'm like, is LSU that good? I don't really know. Is Louisville that good? I didn't think Louisville was that good coming into this year. I thought. Well,
Scott Stafford's a joke, so
yeah, he is. I thought that team was fraudy, and so I think on the health questions of until I know more about who's playing offensively and defensively on the line for FSU, until I know they're in, I operate like they're out. And so if I'm operating like they're out, my question is, how does FSU get pressure? If I'm operating as you guys are already missing Caden Miles and plus Harris, how do I operate with you guys are missing like another third guy and Robert's kind of left tackle? I think one of the big reasons that FSU was so inconsistent last year, I think everyone knew it, was because the offensive line couldn't hold up.
But also Mackenzie Milton threw 4 picks.
Mackenzie Milton. Oh, I don't mean that game. I just mean the season in general.
Oh, this is a whole guy.
Yeah, season in general. Yeah, I mean, part of it was the offensive line. You guys couldn't snap the ball half the time. Like,
yeah,
I think you guys can snap the ball this time, but it's like, if you're missing 3 guys that were either vying to be starters or full on starting, that's a big ask, even for a mobile quarterback. It's a really big ask. And, the second he starts taking more and more hits, what happens there? And, I have been so impressed with Jordan Travis this year. I don't want to leave without saying that I've been so impressed. I didn't think he was necessarily bad, but I didn't think he'd be this. And it's been amazing to watch what he's done. And it's been amazing to watch Micah Pittman run like a running back, like catch a ball and just turn into a running back with the ball.
Dude, he's like Debo Samuel, the way he just runs over people and just like literally, he's a pit bull out there. He literally will bowl through you. Like, what's the Marshawn Lynch video where it's like, people want to get hit in the face over and over and over again? That's Micah Pittman out there.
Yeah, and so I really love the offensive pieces, but my question just is, until I know people are in, is just, can they hold up against an actually good defensive line? I don't know that right now. And like I said, on the other side, like, if FSU can't win with 4, if they're missing players, which I don't know if they are right now, then it gets really, really tough, and you're about to put a lot of strain on a secondary that I like Duke Cooper, but on the other side, I'm like, you better hope Jamie or Keem can get there.
Yeah, I'm about to say, because like I do like Kevin Knowles. He started slowly at the gate, but you can see definitely the confidence for him is actually picking up. And also, I do think that we'll see a little more of AZ Thomas and also
Yeah,
probably spelling of Sam McCall, because I do think we're going to play a lot more second defensive backs actually out there, because I do think I know Tatum Bethune is still dealing with an issue. I do believe he's going to play, but like you said, if this was a fully healthy FSU team from the first game, with still with Caden Lyles out, I honestly would be a lot more comfortable taking FSU. But
yeah,
now, knowing the injuries that I do know, I'm still going to take FSU. I think it's going to be one of those 45 to 42 type of games. I hope
yeah.
it's not that way, because you guys went from Nick Skiba, who was a very great kicker, to another kid who hasn't missed anything at all whatsoever in your new field goal kicker. So to me,
That's been weird.
yeah, I don't know. You guys have a monopoly on kickers right now. It's really astounding. But to me, overall, this will definitely come down to basically, in my personal opinion, turnover battle, because I know at Wake Forest basically has not had a negative turnover margin since 2016, and then also basically with Jordan Travis making sure he's keeping the ball, because last year the game was 35-14, and that was with 6 turnovers. I think 4 of them were picks, thrown by Mackenzie Milton, and 2 of them were fumbles. So to me, overall, it's going to come down to who has the ball first, but we all know it's about to be a shootout. And I'm honestly, this is going to be, to me, it's going to be a better game than NC State Clemson, because I think NC State honestly is going to dominate that game. But
I think Clemson runs them off the field. I think the reason Wake was in that game was because they can throw the ball. I don't think State has receivers.
you want to make a bet on that real quick before we go?
Sure.
What do you want to do?
I mean, I already took Clemson 6.5. So, but I mean, I'm down for whatever you want.
All right, you want to do? Let's do 50. Let's do 50. I got NC State, and then you got Clemson. How about that?
Works for me.
All right, works for me. Well, Cam, it's always a pleasure having you on. Please let the folks know where they can follow your work and also basically engage with you.
Yeah, I write at Bloggers Who Deer on SB Nation, Demon Deacon Digest of 247 Sports alongside Les Johns. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it is at Cam Lemons _. I promise my tweets aren't terrible. I promise. But yeah.
Yeah, unless you're a UCF fan, you won't find your tweets that terrible, or a Miami fan too.
Or Miami fan, yeah, no, Miami fans, you're not welcome here. You aren't welcome.
Oh, no, you can take 20 seconds to say whatever you want about Miami. We can do before we sign off if you want to do that.
I remember being so just distraughtly upset about the Wake game last week, but you know what brought me joy? Watching a bunch of Miami offensive people just run into each other and just get embarrassed. It wasn't a game that I would expect some games that oh cool, like Miami lost, but they had a 70% win percentage. No, they got run up and down the field. That was amazing to watch. That was so amazing to watch. You really hired backs, and we expect this to happen. We don't expect this to happen. And I love Josh Gaddis, and I love what they're doing defensively, but the one thing we've had is just this guy that doesn't make quarterbacks good, and you think, it's all of a sudden their quarterback is going to turn good. That doesn't make sense, but it is what it is.
And that's why we love you, Cam. And for Cam, this was Drake. And we'll see y'all next time on Locked On Seminoles. Take care, everybody, and go Noles.